For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. The Delphi murder mystery. It's a 4-year-old case. It's the first time I'm ever talking about this case, and I'm going to go through 8 reasons why it may be solved at last. And you heard the Indiana officers saying over there that they've changed strategy. Well, is this the change in strategy? And is it going to be successful? Looking at the digital footprints, looking at the social media. 11 days after the bodies of Liberty German and Abigail Williams were discovered, Indiana cops searched Keegan Anthony Klein's home in Peru. 3.5 years later, Klein was charged with 30 counts, including child exploitation, possession of child pornography, and obstruction of justice. I believe there was a solicitation charge in there as well. The FBI at the time of the search on February 25th, 2017, were focused specifically on the possibility of Klein soliciting underage girls. And what do you think that means? It means doing so online. And that is what he turned out to be doing. Using Instagram to put up a persona, kind of getting their attention and then migrating them over to Snapchat. So it turned out that he was doing all of this, and now more than a year after being charged, the public has become party to those charges for the first time. This also means for the first time we may have a name and a face to the man on the bridge, to that mysterious figure that appeared somewhat overweight, didn't he? And the man who said down the hill, was this the man who said it? In this episode we'll examine 8 reasons why Keegan Klein may well be the Delphi killer. But before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So the first aspect that I think, and probably the most important aspect, is the identity of this person. Does it sort of fit the profile that we're looking for? And the answer is yes. We don't know, so at this point there's not been any official announcement. But certainly Keegan Klein does seem to fit the profile of the person that we're looking for. And he fits the profile in terms of his social media, but he also fits the profile in terms of general things such as age, race, occupation, and his preoccupations. At 27 years old, Klein is old enough to be too old for the victims. He would have been 23 years old at the time the crime was committed, but also young enough to be au fait with social media and hip with the things young kids are interested in. Things like music, things like movies, things like the language. In 2017, he would also be at that age where, and I think this is really important, where everyone has a girlfriend and everyone's getting laid except him. And it's starting to become a serious issue. It's starting to become a serious crisis. The other aspect is he's a white male and the victims are also Caucasian. He's got a low status occupation, which is contrasted by his high status bogus profile, which we'll get to in a moment. Being in a low status occupation can often mean that it's difficult to be seen as attractive, or to for someone that you're attracted to, for them to be attracted back to you, right? In a low status occupation. And we also know from his own admissions what he was preoccupied with, and we'll get to that in a moment as well. But basically it was young girls, inappropriately young, and so there is a history and a backstory and an identity that fits so far. In other words, the profile, and that's the most important starting point, that fits so far. Is there anything else? And so if we look at who he is, part of that is what he does for a living. And so we find out that he's a musician from Indiana. Besides that, he's worked as a casino table dealer in Nevada. And he was behind the catfish social media account Anthony Shots, which is probably the most important aspect in terms of what he was doing. And all of this is provided to us via a search warrant filed in Indiana. Klein is the guy behind the account. His full name is Keegan Anthony Klein, and he has also got ties to marijuana and music businesses, right? So look at those things: music, gambling, marijuana, and what is missing from that mixture? How does the cliche go about drugs and rock and roll? What's the first one? Something, drugs, and rock and roll. So it seems as though this character had the drugs sorted out and the rock and roll sorted out. Well, what about the other thing? And he's 23 years old. Well, wasn't that sorely missing in Klein's case? And was it a case of desperate times call for desperate measures? And weren't these desperate measures going online and going to a lot of effort to create kind of a profile, and then actually succeeding at his sort of deviant schemes, right? Now, finally, as we're about to see, Klein's appearance also, when I say appearance, I mean his appearance on the scene, his appearance on the timeline. It fits into the timeline. The incident took place on February 14th, 2017, Valentine's Day 2017. His social media appearances and comments fit into that timeline too. And there's this little screen grab from Keegan Klein's, I think it's his Twitter account, and you can see some cryptic remarks taking place the day after the incident, what is going on in our world, and so on. So it's quite interesting. A lot of those Facebook posts that he's provided there have since been deleted, which is also interesting. So the second aspect of these 8 aspects that make it seem possible, perhaps even likely, that this case has been solved, that they have their man. Well, number 2 is he's from the area. I don't think much needs to be said here except by looking at these maps. The crime took place just outside Delphi. You guys pronounce it Delphi. I would pronounce it Delphi. But yeah, that is a difference in pronunciation. But I'm going to defer to obviously your version of events. I'm not quite sure the Australians and folks from England would pronounce it. The point is, Klein was from Peru, which is a little town that is not far from Delphi. And the park where the incident happened was on the Peru side of Delphi. It would have taken Klein about half an hour to drive from his home to the crime scene, which is very manageable. So the distance is around about 33 miles in a straight line, 47 in terms of driving distance, and it wouldn't take much longer than about 39 minutes to drive from Peru straight to Delphi. And this park where the little girls were found is on the Peru side of Delphi, right? Well, it's so weird saying that like that. It's just counterintuitive to me. Anyway, number 3, social outcast. Would you want to go out with this guy? Most young women and young girls likely wouldn't either, and hence the problem. That's the problem he was facing. And Klein likely knew this better than anyone. He'd experienced it firsthand. He realized if he just continued trying, making approaches, making advances, he wasn't going to get anywhere. And so I think he knew it, accepted it, but also wasn't resigned to being celibate for the rest of his life. He was going to do something about it. And so he came up with a strategy. fake it with the stuff of little girls' dreams. And so Klein conjured pretty simple fakeries of money, fast cars, and model good looks. And besides all that, he sort of identified and promoted himself as sort of a rock star, sort of a musician, a good-looking musician, and girls fell for that. So you put up pictures of wads of cash, of vehicles, of a male model, and thought that this was what young girls wanted, and it sort of was, I guess. And so detectives with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office and the Indiana State Police discovered this Instagram profile called Anthony Shots, where Keegan Klein was sort of promoting this persona, this identity. He was using this profile between 2016 and 2017, and that's also very important. It's around the time that this incident took place. Remember, it took place in early 2017, February 2017. And he was using it on Snapchat and Instagram, and that's really important. It's important that that was sort of where it was, because it appears to be the best, the most obvious way that he would have recruited them and then also migrated them. It's also important to stress that it was not limited to these social media applications. So this fictitious profile used images of a known male model and portrayed himself as being extremely wealthy, not just a little bit wealthy, but extremely wealthy, and owning numerous sports cars, and sort of doing business between New York and LA, and sort of being a kind of a jet setter. And the creator of this profile used this information while he was communicating with juvenile females, young girls, to solicit photos of them, often in a various states of undress, to get their addresses, and then also to meet them. And so this whole thing of meeting them puts this particular individual in the closer to the center of the target of law enforcement. So if law enforcement are looking for a particular person, this person is coming pretty close to the center of exactly what they would be hoping to find. The police have already identified the model in his images, and they're not looking for him. They're looking for the person who created the Anthony Shots profile. And of course, we know who that is. Keegan Klein. So there you have an admission that the cops are interested in the man behind the profile, and as I say, we know who that is, Keegan Klein. That brings us to the fourth point, no ordinary deviant. So you might think Klein is just some sicko preying on kids. He's a dime a dozen. Not quite. He went to extraordinary efforts to design and curate an elaborate online persona, not just on one social media platform, but on SoundCloud as well, and Wikipedia. There are even songs on SoundCloud that, lead one in a particular direction in terms of one's thinking. And one can imagine that he would tell someone he's a musician, they would ask to hear one of his songs, he would send the song from the SoundCloud account, and then that would start the conversation. There would be the sense of, wow, I can't believe you're a musician, I love that song, blah, blah, blah. So when he got a bite on Instagram, as I say, he migrated his catch to Snapchat, where the sleaziness could escalate to a different level behind a curtain of digital privacy. Some of the lyrics from the song Hear Me are, yeah, baby, feel me out, yeah, baby, hear me out. So quite suggestive. And I think it's intentionally done that way. The Anthony Shots profile, at the time that the law enforcement sort of paid attention to it, they saw that he had 77 followers. So he wasn't doing terribly well. But it's also possible that some of those followers have since abandoned that profile. He was following 343 individuals. It would be interesting to see who they were. And he'd only put up 11 posts, which is not a terrible amount of activity. But it's also possible that he removed some. Then what I find very interesting is the way he self-identifies on his Wikipedia page, the way that he sets up himself, this fairy tale version of himself. And so he says, in terms of the Wikipedia page, Keegan Anthony Klein, born May 27, 1994, and by the way, that is accurate, that is his birth year, certainly, is the lead vocalist and guitar player of pop-punk band Keegan Klein, and a former live fill-in lead singer of the band Play Royale. He is an inspiring musician living in Las Vegas, obviously not true, and Indiana, okay, that part is true, currently writing his album Vegas, which is scheduled to drop worldwide, streaming March 13th, 2020, under Gold Bar USA. Now, so it's quite glamorous. He's Vegas based, but he's sort of sitting it out in Indiana, writing his album, and it's going to drop worldwide, and it's going to be quite amazing and everything. And this is meant to get excitement. And I do think that he wanted the release date quite far in the future, because when that date comes up and nothing is released, well then what happens? It goes on, he is managed by Artery Foundation. He got an offer while playing poker in Las Vegas for a job with the Red Bull sign band Beartooth. He went on tour with them for 2 months and decided to join them for the Vans Warped Tour 2015, and also worked on the Vans Warped Tour 2017 and 2018. He then got a gig with Emma Rosa for a fall tour, and so it goes on. And then some of the bands that he apparently played with include Boys Like Girls and The Cute Is What We Aim For. That's apparently the names of some of the bands. And then he goes on to say his break was a blackjack dealer, professional poker player, and he co-owned a marijuana delivery service in Las Vegas. He currently has a marketing company called Klein & Co. So I think some of this is true, with quite a lot of fiction and embellishment added to all of that. And so the Indiana State Police in the Lafayette district have posted these images of this male model from Anthony Schott's account. Now you might think, where does the Anthony come from? Well, his name is Keegan Anthony Klein, and so he uses the middle name as Anthony Schott, which identifies him both as the originator, but also gives him a certain degree of anonymity, right? And I think part of why he did this is because social media often requires you to use your original name. I don't so much mean on Instagram, but certainly on others, such as Wikipedia and Facebook, where there can sometimes be a problem if your name doesn't correspond to your email or something like that. And so creating a fake account, he needs to have a certain degree of protection from his own name, but also a link to his own name, if that makes sense. So I think the thing that is interesting is the Indiana State Police showing this profile of this male model, which is, contrived by, conjured by this fellow, Keegan Klein. And then they specifically say, while investigating the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, they have uncovered an online profile named Anthony Schott. This profile was used from 2016 to 2017 on social media. And then you might say, well, how is this relevant to Abigail Williams? And well, it's being mentioned by the Indiana State Police. It's something that they seem to see as very significant. And that brings us to the fifth point. After 2017, he couldn't stop. And this is a fact. This is dealing with Keegan Klein. So whatever happened on 2017, we know that Klein's predatory activity went on beyond 2017. And I think this suggests that things were getting more and more out of hand. The fantasies were getting the better of him. He was getting more and more out of control. But the perp couldn't stop, couldn't hold back. And what he created had become an addiction. He was becoming caught up in it. And because recidivism is so typical of these particular criminals, and this is also why there's a sex register, Klein possibly got more and more caught up in his deviant fairy tale. And you can see that by some of these posts, such as in May 2018, happy birthday to himself, and he puts up some sort of glamorous photos of bottles of alcohol and a sort of a setting, I guess, in Las Vegas, where he is sort of, I think, soliciting attention to say, I'm having a birthday by myself, who wants to join me, kind of thing. And it's possible that he was in this location because he did work as a casino dealer. And so perhaps some of the images he had access to were real in inverted commas. So that's quite important. Then the sixth point, and I think this is almost as important as the first point, dealing with his profile. He confessed to creating a fake Anthony Shots profile. So it's not speculation, although I suppose one could say technically we can't be 100% sure that if he says that he created the profile, he did. We can't be 100% sure because people lay claim to, in the Brian Laundrie case, for example, there was all the fake social media surrounding that. It does happen all the time. So is that the case here? And that is where I think the authorities are trying to be careful and are being somewhat hesitant. So you might think this is all theory, all hypothetical, but there are some promising leads provided by Klein himself. And the Indiana cops have said that they believe the killer is someone they have already interviewed. It's the clip I played at the beginning of this. And so this I find incredibly strong evidence, and this is from the police report. They say, after Keegan's interview, he was polygraphed at the Peru State Police Post by Sergeant Matthew Collins. Wouldn't it be good to see that polygraph and see what the questions were and the answers? Keegan and Sergeant Collins spoke about this incident and case. Keegan again admitted to creating the fake Anthony Shots profiles and speaking to underage girls. Keegan told Sergeant Collins that the girls ranged from 15 to 17 years old. That is a match for the kind of person they're looking for. And he knew their ages because they told them how old they were. And then it goes into quite graphic detail about what he received from them. And he described quite a lot of what he would do in detail. I'll leave you to go through that. And I think the real question was, when he was asked, did you know about Liberty? Did you know about Abigail? Did you ever meet Liberty? Did you ever meet Abigail? Did you ever interact? And very likely he denied this. And also very likely he may have deleted online artifacts linking himself to them. Now, something I found quite amusing, it's probably not good to be amused by anything in this case, but something I found difficult to believe. The grandmother of one of the victims said that she had never mentioned that she was interacting with this particular individual. Well, I doubt whether she would say so. It's something that does necessarily take place in secret. And that brings us to the seventh point. Bridgeman is unrecognizable even from up close. Why? Well, that's done on purpose. Think about the scenario of Keegan Klein. He's now solicited their attention. They are going to meet. They've agreed to meet with him, and now he's going to be exposed for who he actually is. His appearance is going to be judged, and he's going to be found wanting, right? And is it just me, or do both these images resemble the man of the moment? He's got a similar nose, especially. The sketch certainly shows someone who could be misconstrued as kind of masculine or strong, but it's actually someone who's kind of overweight, right? You can see the side of the cheeks almost go into the neck, right? The width of the neck and the width of the face are similar, whereas with a lot of people, the face is bigger than the neck, right? In this case, the neck is about the same width. But there's a similar look to the nose. The mouth, I think, has got that downward slope, but it's a little bit narrower in terms of photos of Keegan Klein. Then if you look at the photo, you can see that this is quite an overweight individual. It was, I guess, fairly cold, but you can see underneath that he's quite a overweight fellow, and he's hiding that overweightness under bulky clothing and a hat, right? And that brings us to the 8th point. When Liberty and Abigail realized what Keegan really looked like, well, he wasn't going to be allowed to, it wasn't going to be voluntary, put it that way. So obviously fantasy can only go so far before it escalates until finally the final step is reality. A titillating final step for one is a fatal final step for the other. Can you imagine our meeting in the flesh creates an untenable situation where the perpetrator is simultaneously exposed, but the victims also ensnared? So what's the bottom line? Is there direct evidence linking Klein to the crime? And direct evidence would be something like DNA or boot prints matching a pair of his shoes, same size, or phone data, pings and so forth. And I'm assuming there isn't. Otherwise, there wouldn't be this attempt to focus on the social media side of things. I think that evidence is quite strong, it's quite good, but it's still not kind of a smoking gun. The fact that the authorities have refused to disclose the autopsy results of Liberty German and Abigail Williams always bothered me. I suspect they haven't because they haven't wanted to disclose how much evidence is lacking, or put another way, how little evidence was actually found. I could be wrong about that. Bear in mind, there's also water nearby, and the water could have been used to wash the victims, right? It may also have been used to drown the victims. We don't know, because we still don't know the full extent of the autopsy results. On the other hand, if the sort of attack occurred that one imagines, how on earth could there be absolutely no DNA evidence? Also, if he's the guy, why hasn't it been made official yet? Why hasn't it been announced? I think it's about to be announced. I've just got a feeling. I could be wrong. I think it's about to be announced. It's about to be made official. The cops are being careful, in my view. Perhaps they're almost there, but there are a few final loose ends they want to tie up. And social media is quite a tricky area. It's tricky to verify things absolutely. And someone on the Banfield show made quite a good case that the social media companies don't always cooperate with law enforcement. They've got their reasons, but that makes it very difficult. And so that might be the last sort of hurdle that is frustrating this investigation. And so given these loose ends that are in the realm of social media, I think they don't have much choice but to play open cards with the public. And so they're reaching out to the public, and this may be where we are now. And so we know that investigators seized 6 devices from Klein. That's a lot. It shows that this is investigators into this particular case. And that included smartphones, a tablet, and an iPod Touch as part of their 2017 search warrant. And I think what that suggests was that he must have had something like 4 smartphones, right? The iPod Touch was last used in May of 2015, which shows that there was sexual behavior prior to 2017, and we know there was the same thing after, right, which led to his arrest ultimately. And what they're finding is that all of these devices are located throughout Indiana, places like Hammond, Royal Center, Kokomo, Indianapolis, Galveston, Bunker Hill, Monterey, and so on. And I think what they're looking for is something that is centered in Delphi, right? And so what the police want now perhaps is more circumstantial evidence that Klein was active in Delphi, but besides that, if he met anyone in Delphi and how and where that played out. That'll just give a sense of reinforcement to what they feel they already know. And so some of the questions posed to the public were, did you communicate with this profile? When did you communicate? How did you communicate? Which social media platform did you use? Did Anthony Schatz meet you? They don't provide his actual name. And did Anthony Schatz obtain your address, right? And then, have you got any saved images? And that's quite a crucial thing. Do you have saved images of the profile, I guess, but perhaps, did you ever meet in person? Do you have saved conversations? And that is also going to provide a sense of reinforcement to be more certain that this profile and this individual are one and the same. So what do you think? Will participants who shared compromising footage of themselves come forward? Well, given what we know that footage is, I doubt it. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.